Call the meeting to order. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Nevada Irrigation Board of Directors, January 12, 2022. You'll all join me with a salute to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Division 1.
Here.
Division 2.
Here.
Division 3.
Here.
Division 4. Here. Division 5.
Here.
All right. Okay, at this time, we have special order of recognition of employees, presentation of service awards. Doug, anything there?
Yes.
Sure, you moved place.
You were there. It's confusing.
One more time, bring her up.
All right, we just have a quick little presentation. This is definitely one of my favorite presentations to give. It's always an honor to be able to recognize staff and their hard work and their contribution to the district.
Yeah, that's great.
Hold on one second
Yeah,
here.
let's try it again.
We have one employee, 25 years at the district, so that is awesome. You know, one of the things about having long-term employees is it provides continuity. Obviously, they know the system really well, breadth of knowledge, and then just their equipment I'm reading the thing, their commitment to the district is amazing.
It's not cooperating with me.
I wanted to show their pictures.
I know, I'm trying to.
So I'll just go ahead and start, and then we'll show their pictures. So we have our are we starting backwards? Okay, there we go. All right, our first, oh yeah, there's a delay on our tablet. Our first service award goes to Mr. Craig Harkey. He is an equipment operator. He has been with the district since 1996, so that is super awesome. He came to the district as a utility worker. He's worked his way up to an equipment operator. He works out at the Placer County Maintenance Yard. His knowledge of maintenance in Placer County specifically is priceless. He knows the area and second to nobody else in the district. Greg is quick to help and mentor the younger folks and as well teach them what he knows about the system. And one of Craig's best assets is he keeps work fun for everybody else. So he's always quick with a joke, and which is just wonderful for morale. The more people that like to come to work, the better and more productive employees that they are. And he's also very highly skilled at working the excavator. And as somebody who's worked in the maintenance area for a while now, that is definitely a skill that not everybody has. So a very talented equipment operator is very much needed and much appreciated. So a big thank you to Craig for 25 years at the district.
Yeah.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Paul Hopper. He is a water distribution operator, and Paul is well known for providing excellent customer service to our customers. We often get thank yous for his work specifically, and he's always willing to listen to their needs. I have found through my career that one of the things with customers, even if they have a complaint, mostly they just want to be heard, even if you can't fix it. And so we greatly appreciate the staff that is able to do that. And Paul is well known, which this is very awesome to me, putting on one of the best Christmas light displays in Grass Valley.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We need to know where that is.
I know, we do. We will advertise his address on. We'll have a board tour next year. So a big thank you to Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
And then our next three gentlemen, they're all here at 10 years, which is great. So this means they are hired in 2011. We'll first start with Mr. Adams, Lance Adams. He's a welder. And this is a really good skill set for any public agency that maintains infrastructure. We oftentimes find that it's difficult to have new parts fabricated or repairs. And so somebody who is well skilled at welding is invaluable, and welding is something that not everybody is good at. And so it takes years of practice and also just a good touch with the welding tools. So thank you so much to Lance. We appreciate your service. Next, we'll go on to Mr. Dunn, Chris Dunn. He's also a utility worker, and he came to us with a military background. We find a lot of our really good staff do come from the military. They receive just wonderful training. They have a great dedication, and so not only do we thank you for your service to the district, but also to our country. Chris has been maintaining facilities for both treated and raw water, which is really valuable for folks that can cross over between the two systems. And Chris is constantly just working away. So he is one of those highly valued employees, and we greatly appreciate all of your effort. And I believe I saw Mr. Dunn out in the front today working away. So thank you, Chris. And then lastly, we have Mr. Wayne Giles. He's a water treatment operator 3. And what is really interesting about his work history, so he's been here also since 2011 as a utility worker, is that he has kind of raised through the ranks. And so in order to be able to be a water treatment operator, you do have to have certain levels of certifications. And so his ability to be promoted all the way up to a 3, and he currently holds a treatment operator certificate 4 and a distribution operator certificate 2. So that takes, those tests are not easy, and they have to do a lot of studying on their own time to pass those tests. So one of the things we always look for is staff from internal that we can promote into some of these different positions, especially ones that are highly regulated and more complex. So a huge thank you to Wayne. And that is all we had. Is there any questions?
And I want to thank all the employees for their dedicated service, especially when we have years of service combinations. Those speak very highly of those employees. Thank you very much for what you do. Okay, at this time, we'll take public comment on any items not on the agenda. If you would like to comment today, the items pertinent to NID, not on our agenda, start on your phone at this time, and I am not finding the screen. Okay, if you'd like to comment now, start on your phone. And I don't see any either, okay? Then we will move on. Next, the consent agenda. Have anybody who wants to?
I would like to pull item 8.
Item 8, okay?
Yeah, I was gonna pull that one.
And I want to.
Oh, good.
You'll ask my question. Any others? Okay, is there any public comment on the consent agenda, items 1 through 7 and number 9? Start on your phone. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for those items.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval for items 1 through 9, excepting item 8.
Second.
Moved and second, any further more discussion? We don't discuss. Okay, Madam Secretary, you call the roll, please.
Yes, I will. And as discussed, we are going to do a different order starting off this year. So Division 4. Aye. Division 1.
Aye.
Division 5.
Yes.
Division 3.
Aye.
Division 2.
Aye.
Thank you.
You keep us hopping, Chris.
I know, right.
She keeps us hopping.
Order changing.
Yeah, you gotta pay attention.
I know.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, item number 8, Karen, you initiated this one?
Yeah, my first observation, just generally, which people feel free to disagree, but I would like to see the quarterly versus actual budget report as part of a discussion item, because I feel like this is, the financial oversight is one of our 3 core responsibilities, and I think we should always be taking time to talk about this as opposed to just passing it through, and I think making it a discussion item.
I agree.
Towards that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. So my plan is to start having one of the quarterly, on a quarterly basis, the workshops focusing on financials.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. So I had some questions, and I recognize this is at the third quarter, so we're not seeing the full year. And so you might say, well, hold your thoughts until the final. So I get that, and that's a fine response. But I noted that the treated water sales were up 2.4 million, and raw water sales were up 493,000. At the same time, we had the drought surcharge, so I was like, how does that fit in? Actual income is up, but we're supporting a drought surcharge. I just think we need to get that full picture of how the drought surcharge is fitting in with our year-end balance. So, anyway, that's more of a, I think we'll probably talk about that later, but it's like, it seemed in conflict.
That's, you're answering my question, so, or bringing up my question, or pointing out.
I could provide some context. So one of the things that gets a little bit complicated is the drought surcharge is set through the Prop 218 process, which is based off of the knowledge and data and assumptions that they had at the time. So when it gets implemented, it's not recalculated. It is consistent. It has to be consistent unless we do something less than with the Prop 218 study. However, I think where this comes into the conversation is, do we need to automatically implement it by stage, or should we have a little bit more flexibility for the board to make the determination at the time based off of actual revenues and expenditures? So when we come back regarding the drought surcharge, we'll do a deeper dive and provide some additional data. So the current data related to the expenditures that were related to the drought almost align exactly with the revenue that's collected for the drought surcharge. But at the same time, do we need to collect it based off of our current revenue and expenditures?
Right.
I think that that's something that we should take a look at.
Yeah.
And then just also something to note, in third quarter financials, especially in the district, right now, because we're still moving through a larger scale financial cleanup, most accruals are made at the end of fiscal year end, as opposed to on a monthly basis by period. And so once we get that cleaned up, you won't have these big jumps in expenditures at the end of the fiscal year, because anything that is a large accrual backwards will be done on a monthly basis as opposed at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's good.
So go ahead, Karen.
No,
I'll say my question, ties into that. How's that reflected in the quarter release when you have total accrual this cash? Does it?
So when we move to closing periods and doing large accruals on a monthly basis as opposed to the end of the year, you will see them reflected in the quarterly financials throughout the year, as opposed to having, low expenditures and then them jump at the end of the fiscal year because we're making all those accruals backwards. So accrual accounting basically means that the period in which the cost is incurred, not the invoice paid, is the period in which it is booked from an accounting purpose. Currently, we are not, and this is one of the biggest challenges with our finances and why they're still fairly messy, is that we're not closing periods on a regular basis. So typically, in any given fiscal year, you would have 13 periods. You have 12 periods associated with each month of the fiscal year, and then period 13 is the last period in the fiscal year. And that's where you'll see some accruals made, for example, OPEB payments, or, PERS unfunded liability, or accrued absences is a good one. You'd see that done at the end of the fiscal year. Currently, because we're not closing periods, we get to the fiscal year end close, and they essentially have to go through this huge cleanup process of accruing things to the proper period they were in, and that's why you're seeing this big jump in numbers. So once we finish with our financial cleanup, it'll be much better. So the plan is, starting on January 24th, I am going to be bringing in a consulting team that is going to assist. We'll also be bringing forward a contract to the board for consideration with the full scale cleanup of all the financials, which will be much more straightforward from a financial, monitoring perspective for the board.
But it's gonna be more real time.
It'll be more real time, the numbers, you'll have more confidence in the numbers, and I think we will, the way we're looking at starting to reformat some of the reports, it should be more straightforward and provide you greater oversight.
Yeah.
And then we will move to utilizing those quarterly meetings to review the finances so that the board has a comfort level, because that really is your greatest responsibility, is ensuring the finances of the
And
business.
accountants and auditors hate major adjustments at the end of the year.
Yeah, so for example, we're doing about around 50 to 70 adjustments after fiscal year end close, and I have heard at one time we were up in the hundreds. That really shouldn't be occurring. We should really be down 9, 10, 11 adjustments after fiscal year end. So that'll give you a good kind of benchmark for how the finances are doing. So, but mind you, we are starting the major cleanup already into the fiscal year, although only 24 days, but we'll start seeing some big changes here fairly soon.
Nice.
Thank you for that. I'm so appreciative of the work that you and Debbie and the accounting team are putting into this, because it's not easy, but the commitment that you and the district are making in this area is, to me, so important. Anyway, I think it just is a really important effort that you're undertaking.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my personal goals as general manager for this year, is to ensure those finances are completely cleaned up.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a lot of work, but I'm confident we have the capable staff. And then once it's done, it's easy to keep it clean.
And you've got, good building blocks.
Yep, foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
And this will allow us to make more informed decisions.
Exactly. So it really dovetails nicely with the plan for water and future investment planning.
Definitely.
I'm going to not go too far into this because it sounds like we're really a work in progress. I would just note that at the bottom of the first page with the spreadsheet type of information, we have for the district as a whole, revenue and transfers in excess of expense and transfers out at 16 million. So I really look forward to seeing how that levels out once you do the accruals, and because that then ties into what the drought surcharge maybe could be, and it just gives us a better picture for planning in future years. It's just the first page of the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so moving forward, so kind of the steps will be, we're going to clean up the finances and get a real handle on what's going on, and then we can restart the Prop 218 process. And, the Prop 218 process could come forward with, we don't need a rate increase till year 3 is a rate period, or, whatever the outcome is, but we'll be more confident on those decisions. And then the board can make a policy decision as to whether or not you even want a drought surcharge, right? There are other ways to deal with drought surcharges.
That's my idea.
Well, however, I do have to note that if you don't have a drought surcharge, then you are going to be building in some additional costs into your everyday rates. And so one of the biggest costs related to the drought was the purchase of that PG&E water.
Right.
And so as the board is aware, we also put the PG&E water in the budget for this year, or the purchase of it. So if you build some of those costs into your annual budget, then it's a little bit less. You don't necessarily need a drought surcharge, but we'll just have to go through the analysis.
Because it's in the same rate setting, the same Prop 218 process, we increased the fixed fee
Yes.
to cover the ups and downs in revenue. And so I've heard from constituents that, wow, you jacked up the fixed fee, saying you needed to cover these ups, and then once it goes down a little bit, then you're adding more costs. So it's a hard one. It's a hard sell.
And that is a really good point. You will see more and more agencies, because of the uncertainty relating to the statewide conservation measures, as well as uncertainty just related to climate change and potential droughts, that more and more agencies are recovering more of their costs through the fixed portion of the rates.
Yeah.
A lot of those did not assess drought
Correct. Most
Well-
agencies that have a, higher fixed fee do not have a drought surcharge.
Except if you have to buy water in the open market, and then it can fluctuate wherever it goes.
Correct.
And that is one where you really get hit.
Contract.
Huh?
We have a contract with each
Right,
agency.
that's.
Correct.
That's
And so we can fix that price.
we're less vulnerable to that one.
Now,
We're very well suited to have a higher fixed fee and no drought surcharge.
but remember, in 2014 and 15, we had reserves to buy water and to
Yeah.
take care of the surcharge. We blew through those really quick. And people got used to the fact, oh, we're in drought, our price hasn't gone up. So we got a balancing act to do.
Right.
And we
And
don't want to shock anybody.
communication,
And communication.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
My other kind of observation, well, I have a question first. On the water budget, I think you said, Jennifer, that included the transfer in from hydro?
Yes, that's the total budget for revenues did, and this was one of the issues with the previous budget, is transfers were being counted as new, new revenue.
Okay. I thought it was interesting that hydro, I just want to make sure that we're looking at hydro's kind of financial bottom line and the shifting, it is experiencing higher expenses. And so, and I think understandably, I just want to make sure we're really cognizant as the new fiscal model with overhead allocation shows, water has a different picture than has been presented in past years. And hydro certainly has a different picture. So I just want to because of that, the expectation in the community is that hydro is this giant moneymaker. And that really hasn't been true because of the way we allocated overhead. I mean, the truth of its profitability, not that it's not profitable, but it's the level of profitability. So I just want to keep an eye on that, and to me, this points out that, where the trends are starting to change, plus your the budget model for 2022 shows that as well.
I agree. There's also a couple other things to remember. So this year, the capital program for water was kept extremely low. The costs, the labor and equipment costs associated with the South Yuba Canal transfer were not included in the hydro budget, so we will be bringing that forward, as well as any potential subsidy to the U.S. Forest Service for the operation of the U.S. Forest Service owned campgrounds, which is still being negotiated, is also not included. So those will be additional items that will be coming back forward. One of the things that Kian and I have been discussing is he already has a long-term capital program, but we're going to shore up kind of those numbers so we can take a long-term look at the FERC relicensing expenses, South Yuba Canal expenses. Because as the board has asked previously, which I think is prudent to do, we do need to do a powerhouse by powerhouse analysis on whether they make financial sense. On an individual basis. So once we move through that, we will start bringing that forward to the board.
That's great to hear, because we have been wanting that for some time.
Yeah, the key was to, as Director Hull pointed out, was to pull those overhead expenditures out.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, recognizing it step by step. So I think I just really appreciate the models that you're using and the way that the planning effort starts fitting together into a bigger picture with finances.
And one of the things we're going to have to kind of look at as we go through the plan for water, the FERC relicensing requirements for in-stream flows, there was some consideration in the negotiations given to some contract language as it pertains to reduction in powerhouse revenue, but there is also going to be a reduction associated with the inability to sell that water as well. And so we need to also analyze that portion of the FERC relicensing and any in-stream flows to better understand how that's going to impact the district's overall fiscal health.
Did you say inability to sell the water?
Yeah, so if we're doing in-stream flows, we're obviously not storing it and then selling it, either raw water, treated water, so there's an additional revenue impact.
Yeah. Okay, that's me.
Very good, thank you.
A lot of moving parts.
Brought it up, both of them. Did you have some? Okay,
Ricky.
Wait, Ricky does.
Ricky does.
Look at this.
Go ahead.
I just have,
Director Heck.
thank you
Please
very
go
much.
ahead.
Thank you very much. I have a couple things to just note, and I was looking at the treated water consumption numbers and looking at this, very, very steady increase on an annual basis. And I'm wondering, Chip is here, I'm wondering, these aren't page numbers. By the way, it would be really great to have page numbers.
How are you?
Well, let's see, I'm on about 1, 2, 3, page 3 in there, it's the second page of the spreadsheet. Yeah, this is all divisions. And it's about the third page in. And it says budget to actual, all divisions at the top. And it has, this is on the expense page. And then at the bottom, it has treated water consumption. Are you guys with me?
Mm-hmm, yep.
Okay, great. So I'm wondering what we can surmise, if anything, about these very steady increases in the treated water consumption as opposed to conservation, which we've been trying to get.
So the biggest one is 2015 was the most stringent water restrictions that anybody had had. So you do see that as the lowest year of consumption across the board for Northern California agencies. And so you are seeing kind of this uptick since then. And then especially when you get off that high water year, what was that, 2017? People then weren't conserving as much water. And then, as we were talking about last night, I think Chip hit the point, water use consumption is driven based off of growth, which has been very nominal, insignificant, but it's also primarily based off of the weather. So then we're having a couple of overlapping situations. We're coming off of heavy water restrictions in 2015, and then we have a heavy water year, so people, we don't have to worry about water, and then you get into where there's some significant heat after that, and so that all starts driving those numbers up. Chip, do you have anything else to add?
No. Actually, this particular year, when we get to the water supply update, I'll show you where we're at in current consumption on treated water, and it's actually very close, because consumption was very high at the beginning of the year until we did mandatory drought restrictions, and then we actually got conservation, so.
Okay, I'll look forward
By the time the year is over, it'll all wash.
It'll all wash. It'll all wash. Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing that. This was really a head scratcher for me. Then on that same page, Jennifer, if you look at the unrestricted versus restricted cash balances, and the total unrestricted is 84 million, it looks like, and I'm thinking, gosh, that's like a really big number. Is that because we don't have all the accruals and all the encumbrances in there?
Some of that is because of that. The unrestricted, most of our reserves are considered unrestricted cash balances.
Right.
They're not reserved for some legal purpose.
Understood,
Reserved by policy.
Right.
Yeah, let me go back through these numbers. Some of these reports are being extrapolated from previous quarters.
Yeah.
Let me go back and.
Well, I wondered if that's how accurate that was. That's a really big number in it.
It's pretty accurate. I mean, that's about, off the top of my head, how our cash balance has been running, and then giving into consideration any receivables and liabilities. It's around there.
Right.
I'd have to refer back to the budget documents to kind of see where we thought the reserves were at. Remember, a lot of that money is tied up in reserves with hydro from the capital reserve as well. So
Right.
Right.
And-
gonna see that,
Go ahead.
budget? The final budget?
So the budget's been finalized, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Are you referencing the document? Yeah, so we're still working on it. The remainder of the document is just kind of the fluffy stuff. So right now, we're focusing on, we have a little bit of issues in finance. So once those get done, we'll put that back on the list.
And then lastly is, I would just ask, and you and I talked about this yesterday, but this is on the summary page for those who want to follow. There is a spot, this is very nominal, but it says new revenue of $28,000 for support services contract makes its appearance this quarter. And I confirmed with Jennifer that this is from that contract with South Sutter for us helping them. But I would just ask that you identify it
Sure.
so that, we can see what that is.
Who it is?
Who it is, yeah, where we get this money. You open your wallet and sell your farm and make a donation, or what?
It also may be worth pointing out in that narrative, which I thought was really good. I thought the narrative had a lot of meaningful points in it, and sometimes in the past I just questioned, helping us to draw attention to things. I thought it was very well done. But it notes that we had the salary and benefits increase only slightly over last year at $150,000. And I thought that was a really good comment to make, because we were so far behind in the marketplace with our staff salaries. So I think we did the right thing by getting them up toward center point of the market. And we were able to do that. You and the district were able to do that by reducing those FTE, and not filling positions, so.
And overall expenses.
Yes. So I just think that's worth calling out as a commendation.
Absolutely.
That's all I have, thank you.
Any other comments on this item? Thank you for initiating that, Karen. Answered both my. Sure. Is there any public comment on item number 8, quarterly budget versus actual report? If you'd like to comment at this point, starting on your phone. Last chance, don't see any. Okay. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Wait, we need a motion.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay, I will move approval of item 8, the quarterly budget versus actual report to receive and file.
I'll second.
Second, any further discussion by the board? Okay. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Aye.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you all. Okay. Item number 10, annual orders. Loma Rica Ranch, Mr. Roderick.
Yes, thank you.
Back on the hot seat again this morning.
Yeah, it seems like we were just here.
Yes.
I can't join video, by the way.
Oh, I need to promote you.
So, good morning, board, staff, members of the public, Doug Roderick, Engineering Manager. The discussion we're gonna have today is, we're gonna have a brief presentation on the California Statewide Communities Development Authority, as well as the Community Investment Program, which is the SCIP program. Sorry. After that discussion, the plan is to have a public hearing, so we request that the president open the hearing, receive public comment, and close the hearing, and then based on the information we get in the hearing, as well as discussions we have with staff and the board, whether we would suggest approving Resolution 2022-04. Basically, it's quite a long list there. I won't go into the whole detail on what that was stated. But that format and the way that's laid out is what needs to be done as part of the approval process. So the language and the information in the resolution is basically what's required should you decide to move forward in adopting the resolution. So that came from the folks that run the program. So with that, Jennifer has quite a bit more knowledge on this program than I do, and so I'll refer to her to let her start the discussion on that, and then bring the
Perfect, thank you, Mr. Roderick. Just a quick note, I believe James is also on the line. James is the representative from the California Statewide Community Development Authority. So this is an authority that was formed as a JPA by the League of Cities as well as I always forget what the counties association is, California State Association of Counties. And it was formed for the sole purpose of being able to complete bond issuances for the purpose of financing infrastructure. So there's a couple of options for financing of infrastructure from a developer perspective. One of those options is they can, pay cash. They can get a more traditional loan from some type of financial institution. Oftentimes, and I know this is a little bit of a sensitive subject in Nevada County in particular, because I know there are some very strong concerns regarding growth. In other counties, such as Placer County, that has a lot more growth going on, especially in western Placer County, oftentimes developers will request the local governing agency, for example, a city or a county, to issue a bond under the Mello-Roos Act, which was state legislation that was enacted for the purpose of funding infrastructures. So traditionally when a developer requests for a city or a county to complete a bond issuance on their behalf, what occurs is that the city or county may form what's referred to as either an assessment district or a community facilities district. And that forms a boundary around a particular district. And so each one of the parcels within the district becomes a member of the district. What you usually see is that these districts are formed prior to any parcels being sold. So if it's a normal assessment district, the formation of the district has to be formed by 51% of the parcels that are inside the district. Under a community facilities district, it's more of a tax, and so it actually requires 2/3 of the property owners to vote to be part of it. So in a traditional sense, when a developer comes to a city and requests the formation of one of these assessment districts or facilities districts, they typically own most or all of the land at the time of request for the formation of the district. So the district is then formed, and it can be completed for a financing mechanism, for a bond issuance, or it could be formed to fund long-term maintenance and operation costs, or even police and fire services if you so chose to do so. So if a developer is going to utilize this financing mechanism for funding of infrastructure, they develop a engineer's report that outlines the infrastructure that would be included into the financing district, and then a bond is formed and issued to fund the infrastructure. So the bond is formed, issued, and then the parcels within the district, through annual assessment placed on their parcel, they then repay the debt obligation. This is an okay system to use, but what you often find that in the long term, it is very burdensome from an administrative standpoint for the local agency. It requires annual assessments to be placed on the tax rolls. It requires a large upfront cost just for the formation of the bonds. When you go through a bond issuance, you have bond counsel and underwriters and financial planners, which all cost a lot of money to even get the bond going off, to go forward. So what another alternative is, and for a small agency like us, I think that it's probably more beneficial and prudent because it removes the administrative burden from the district, is that utilizing the CDA program, which is a joint power authority. So what they do is they bundle up the bond requests and do bond issuances twice a year throughout the state. So what is required prior to participation in the program, the local agency that is going to participate and have their infrastructure funded through the bond issuance is required to adopt a resolution in a public hearing to be part of the program. So the item before the board today is not necessarily exactly related to Loma Rica, because this is the first step in allowing any project to participate in the program. The Loma Rica project was the catalyst for us bringing forward this program to the board for consideration, because they were having some difficulties with the payment of their fees and the timing of those payments. And so the the bond issuance or the, fees that can be, you can roll into the bonds fees or infrastructure. If infrastructure is rolled into the bond, then we develop an infrastructure acquisition agreement where the developer builds and constructs the infrastructure, and then they get reimbursed for the infrastructure, and we acquire through agreement the infrastructure that was constructed for us. In this particular situation with Loma Rica, they have requested to be able to utilize the program to fund the payment of their capacity fees. And they have also agreed to fund the construction of a water main through their project. When we originally asked, what the water main will do, and Doug can speak to this a little bit more in depth than I can, it basically provides for our ability to loop the system in that area. So when we originally asked the developer to construct the water main going through the development so we could have a secondary connection, they had declined because of the rate of reimbursement that they would have to experience to be able to recoup their upfront costs with constructing and paying for this water main. And so, Doug, can you explain a little bit more about the background on the water main?
Yeah, sure. So, this water main is a separate transmission main that we think is a good idea to install. Now is the best time to do it. There's no pavement, there's no roads, there's no homes. So it's easy to install, AKA as cheap as we can get it. It's basically a 16-inch transmission main that comes from Brunswick over to Dorsey Drive. And what that does is it allows improved flows on the northwest side of Highway 49. We have some high velocity issues during peak demands on the transmission main on West Main Street that will help alleviate that. We've also got some restrictions up in the Escaton area where we will get the need to upsize the pipe. By putting this transmission main in, we don't have to do that necessarily. So there's just a lot of benefits there for us to do it, and now's the right time to do that.
And so if the board were to approve this item, it's the first step in allowing participation under this bonding program. And so once we are part of the program, and then the project proponent, Loma Rica, in this case, would then come back and we would have a separate agreement with them for acquisition, inclusion of the fees and acquisition of this future infrastructure into the program. If that were all to occur, that the board approved today participation with the program, and then subsequently the agreement for the fees as well as acquisition of the infrastructure that was included, then CSDA rolls in the costs of these items, the fees and the infrastructure construction, into their bond issuance. They issue the bonds, and then they're responsible for placing the bonds in the tax rolls. And so it really takes the administrative burden out of the district. It also allows for this infrastructure to be financed without the district's bonding capacity to be impacted. But I did want to just touch bases with James. He is the true expert in this. James, do you see him? There we go. James raised his hand. James, can you add in anything I may have inadvertently left out or gotten wrong?
No, Jennifer, I think you covered it very well. Just one other thing to add is that, there is no liability to the district or any participant for participating in this. These are direct obligations of the developer. So if there are any issues associated with it, nothing flows back to the irrigation district or any other participant in the pool.
And that was, I think that Director Heck brought up that question. What happens if somebody within the district doesn't pay their annual assessment that is required to pay the annual debt obligation? That would not be an impact on the district because we're not holding the debt obligation ourselves. So that debt obligation will not show up on our financials. And then CSDA would deal with that. And as with all bonds, you are required through the bond issuance and all the bond disclosure underwriting documents, and CSDA as well, as they have a layer within the cash held in the fiscal agent to pay for any delinquent accounts.
There's a covenant close. There's a threshold, 5%.
Who does the foreclosure?
They would.
They would.
Which is a fantastic thing, let me tell you. I've had to do this on occasion. Not fun.
It is challenging, especially with a district our size and even a larger city, forming community facilities districts or assessment districts and doing the administrative management of them over the total term of the bond, which is typically 20 to 30 years, get really, really messy after a while.
Two we have right now, right?
Correct, yeah.
This work.
Yeah.
Director Peters had a question first.
My understanding when we talked about the Loma Rica Ranch, and maybe it changed or something, but my understanding was that they were gonna put in the transmission, we were just gonna pay for the upsizing to the size that we needed, that we were gonna actually pay for our transmission line. We would take advantage of the opportunity of having
No, the additional one,
the upsizing to feed our west main, you know, to.
Yeah, so
for our
no,
benefit.
I don't specifically remember that, but all that we've been looking at is they have to install their pipeline for the distribution system within there. And for this, it's a separate transmission main that won't be serving any of the parcels within it. It's truly a transmission main, which would be subject to capacity fees and the reserves to be able to pay for that.
And
So
we're paying for that. That's
we would
not
pay-
part, that wouldn't be part of the
they would be
cost.
paying for all of the infrastructure for the distribution system. We would be paying for this additional, roughly 2,100 feet of 16-inch pipe, which would be a true transmission main from point A to B that would be installed.
That's how I remember it.
they were,
That we paid for it.
we
Yes.
asked them to provide that initially.
Yeah.
So when they came to us so anytime a development comes to us and we take a look at it, if there's opportunity where we see as part of your project, we would like to see that pipe upsize or see additional infrastructure in, is when we get with the developer to talk about that. And so that's how this typically comes about, once that subdivision comes in, and we start to review the plans, et cetera. This particular one is, it's gonna be roughly $800,000 to $850,000 is the recent estimate that we've seen for the installation of this pipe, which is still the best dollar price right now, because there's nothing to have to restore or deal with. It's just bare land out there, bare dirt, now that it's been graded, so.
Because I understand that, on the government center in Auburn, that pipeline, as part of the deal for them to be able to do their development, they had to install at their cost our pipeline. But this isn't, that's different than this development. We're gonna pay for our pipeline.
We're gonna pay for the transmission pipeline. So the distribution pipeline, which is also going to be our pipeline, that they'll convey to us through the conveyance agreement, the developer's on the hook to pay for all that, because they need that for their development.
But don't you need transmission to get water to their distribution system?
No, they're tying off the transmission main on Brunswick. We have one.
An existing.
Exactly. This just allows us to push more water over to Dorsey and across the Dorsey to, Sierra College Drive, to push water over that side to help the flows.
Is there already, infrastructure on that other side that we're serving, and now because
Yes.
we're tapping in, we're gonna require that we
Correct.
need to have
Yeah,
separate?
we've got services all over. All we're doing is completing the loop to make water flow a little more easily through the system, so it doesn't start to squeeze in certain areas, which is where we start to have the high velocities and flow issue concerns, fire flow concerns.
And with this additional distribution system on the same existing line, it creates issues. Why do we need the
Is
additional?
it a separate line?
Separate line.
It's a separate line.
Is it?
So Doug, another way to ask the question is, if you didn't do the transmission line, you would have a whole separate, you'd have a project exclusive to the Loma Rica subdivision.
Correct.
And that's what the developer is paying for, and they don't need that additional transmission line in any way. So it would, I don't know there'd be any rationale for expecting the developer to pay for a transmission main that they don't need and get no value from.
Right, we're just taking advantage of an
Well,
opportunity.
Ultimately, overall, there's some value just because everybody benefits in the system a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's no need to install this transmission main to make this subdivision work and have the ability to meet its water demand.
Yeah, typically,
It just is more of a stress on our system because now we have.
No, so
No.
we already have the stress on our system in some areas, and it's just because of piping, right? We have restrictions in areas that causes flow problems. This allows us to make that flow more uniform and circle through a larger section of pipeline. just improves our overall flow in our system. It doesn't impact, this particular project is not gonna make any difference to the flow impacts that we're talking about for this transmission.
Developers are typically not required to pay for infrastructure costs that are not directly benefiting their particular development.
Correct.
This particular item is just to request participation in the SCIP program. It was precipitated by the need for Loma Rica, but is not necessarily related to approval of the acquisition agreement for the Loma Rica transmission line.
Director Johansson.
So I don't see a downside joining CDA, and I see a big upside. And the win-win is, we have products, we have water and service, and we need to make it as convenient, as easy for our customer, in this case the developer, to get his job done, to get his project in, because that benefits us and the community also. So I just think it's a win-win, and we should join. It's just adding another tool in the toolbox to finance a whole bunch of projects that may benefit the community and us. And good deal. Let's do it.
I agree. Anybody else?
I had a question on whether the way we're managing the district finance water line extensions, if this would be a mechanism for neighborhoods to fund that kind of expansion. Because I think the district water line extension program is a wonderful program, but I don't see how it can possibly be financially viable in the long term across the district. And it seems to me that if you have a funding mechanism, so instead of doing these special districts where, we have the district finance water line extension program that the district is putting up the money for. If they could use this, if a neighborhood could use this system, then it seems to be an attractive financing mechanism, but I didn't know if it was feasible for that purpose.
No, that's what it's for.
The heavy burden is the 2/3 vote to form the district in the first place. So all the parcels within the district have to vote in affirmative of forming the district. But James, I'm not aware from my experience, but I'm more on the development side. Has CSDA ever done formation of a district for an existing neighborhood?
Yes, we actually have, for smaller, and it's been in the Sierra foothills on the other side in El Dorado County. So we have done it. It has been a little bit more difficult to gather, to your point, Jennifer, the votes, but it can be done. The threshold typically is in getting all the projects together, the existing projects, of between 400 and 500,000 total, not per property, but total for the area. But yes, we have done it, and it can be done.
So James, for clarification for me is, so the 400,000 or 500,000, that's the project expense? Make it viable for you to proceed?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the reason for that is when we go out and sell these bonds to the marketplace, they're looking for a minimum threshold. So that's when we go out to the marketplace, what they're looking for.
Okay.
How do you get paid?
We take a fee, an issuance fee when the bonds are issued, and then there's an ongoing administration fee associated with the ongoing work that Jennifer outlined that we do on an ongoing basis.
How much are they?
Upfront, the issuance fee on the entire pool, so it's charged to the 20+ projects typically that are in the pool, is 1.5%, and then ongoing is 10 basis points annually.
Which is consistent with even if we did an individual bond issuance, you would still build into the bond layer administration.
When we refinanced our prior bonds, there was a bond issuance fee.
Right.
It's always the case. Yeah.
Thank you, James.
Go ahead, Director Heck.
Thank you. Let's see. Who is the, so CSCDA issues the money, I mean, it's just like, let's just talk about the money part. So they issue the money, so, you know, developer comes, you guys issue a bond for whatever it's gonna be, $500,000 or something, we'll use that as an example. Then, is NID receive that money up front? How does this work?
We verify the expenditures under, and then they submit the reimbursement request directly to CSDA what is my recollection. Is that correct, James?
So for improvements, if you're doing a water line and they're constructing it, the funds would be placed into a trust account. And then when those improvements are completed at satisfaction to the district, then those monies are forwarded to the contractor for that. If it's for fees, if it's for water capacity fees or those funds are either directly paid by the developer and then the developer is reimbursed, or when we issue bonds, those go directly to the district itself. So in either way, you're getting your money up front rather than over time.
So Jennifer, could you comment on how, if we were to participate in this, as it relates to the next item on delaying the receipt of capacity fees until, say, building permits? How do those work together?
The only difference would be, so currently, as the policy currently reads, it's just the timing of the reimbursement and the request.
Yeah.
That's it. So, in the current policy, it requires payment of fees at final map. Then stuff that, in particular to Loma Rica, the board then had made a determination through the site agreement with the developer that they was 50% upfront and then 50% at
Then the rest over 4 years.
the rest over 4 years. So in this particular case, if the policy were to change, then this reimbursement would happen more on a block basis as opposed to 50%. But they already have an existing agreement, and so because it's not cash out of their pocket, I would suggest we stick with the 50%.
So I think,
Wouldn't impact that agreement.
And not necessarily, no.
so I think part of it too is a lot of the development projects that are done here are small.
Yes.
So it may be an 8 or a 10 parcel subdivision, which is, you know, $100,000 in capacity fees and maybe $200,000 or $300,000 for infrastructure improvements,
Right.
which may not even be enough to kind of hit this threshold to be part of that.
Yep.
Yeah, typically what happens is developers are more willing to just pay upfront, right, rather than spread the payments out over time if they're participating in the SCIP program.
So I have some other questions, if I can.
Ricky, may I have a follow-up on Doug's
Sure.
question or comment? So you mentioned, you know, our costs might not fit into the program. Is the developer typically bundling though? Are they saying, all the costs that the county may have and so so in other words, is it one large bond that includes all infrastructure as opposed to we have an NID related bond and a county related bond?
So, typically, well, I should say, most of our subdivisions do not have specific bonds that they're being, because they're smaller in nature. So it's just a smaller developer that's putting that money out upfront and paying for it. So we don't receive, they build the infrastructure and then hand it to us. So we're not involved with the financing of it or anything related to it other than making sure it meets our standards and specifications, and then when it's done, they give it to us. So the financing mechanism, we're not necessarily a part of.
I guess-
With regards to the.
In this situation, the developer could request that the fees that are due to be paid to Grass Valley also be rolled into this bond
Okay,
issuance.
okay.
But that would be outside of anything that we would.
Yes. But that then means that smaller projects potentially could qualify for this program because they're having more
They could.
sources of
There's enough
expense
information,
built
enough-
in.
Right.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about all-in fees being in the $50,000 to $65,000 range per parcel.
Right.
You can get up there even with a 20-unit development.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
No problem. So, I always worry about developers, you know, having financial difficulty. And in one of your comments earlier, you said that the developers are having difficulty paying their fees. And so my question then goes to, what happens if you know, we form this district, and the bond is issued, and they get down the road, and they don't complete the work because they just walk away, they BK, whatever, you know, whatever the reasons are. Then kind of what happens? We've got infrastructure or some part of it in the ground being paid for by these bonds.
The developer won't receive reimbursement until we take acceptance of the infrastructure. So in the case that they went bankrupt, they would have never received, I mean, if we just play this out, right? They would have never received reimbursement, and then CSDA would still hold the money, and then they could just pay off the debt obligation.
CSDA.
Yeah, we are not in this, so all we're doing is approving that, we're saying, yes, this was in fact constructed per the acquisition agreement. That's it. The money's not moving through us.
Okay, but what happens if they don't finish?
They would have never received the money. They would have never.
They would never have received the money.
They would have never received the revenue associated with the bond issuance.
And then there's money to finish
Then
it?
there's money to finish off, well, or there's money.
And then would it become our problem to finish
We would have
it off?
never, no, we would have not have accepted the infrastructure. It would be ghost town
Yeah,
infrastructure
if it hadn't been completed yet, it would just be pipe in the ground. It's not ours until we.
on private property.
And is it tied to our system?
We would have tied it in,
Right at
no.
the end, when they give us all the other information and all the other
Yeah.
requirements, then we have a jumper, and we'll pull that jumper and do a final tie-in.
No.
So,
Okay.
The jumper was for fire protection.
it's just to allow for pressure testing and flow, et cetera, right? The jumper's usually not big enough for real fire flows. It's just like a 2-inch that
I
you
thought that was part
build
of-
pipelines and test them.
I thought that was part of the discussion with Loma Rica, they wanted
Yeah, they want
fire
to.
flow going.
Yes, there,
But you can do that through the jumper. So in order to start going vertical beyond models, you do, well, even with models, you're supposed to have working fire hydrants.
right.
As soon as 6 start going up, you have to have working fire hydrants, and then for them to achieve occupancy, because the homes are built after 2013, they're required to have indoor sprinklers, and so they wouldn't be able to meet those conditions. But it's typical for the service to be jumped until the final tie-in is made.
And then what happens if this is also commonly done in the development world? And from my experience, that they go through and they get their entitlements and so on, and then they flip the project, they sell it to somebody else. What happens with this structure that we've now done?
They do it through
That's what's
assignment.
going, yeah.
Yeah, it happens, it goes through assignment, so.
It's a lien on the
yeah.
property.
It's a lien on the whole property.
Yeah, it's just
On
assignment.
every individual parcel that's included in the district.
Uh-huh.
And as I mentioned earlier, there's a covenant to foreclose. So let's say we're in year 10 of 30 of bond repayment. For some reason, that covenant is, you have enough delinquencies, even though they're separate property owners, most likely by that time. You have enough delinquencies to trigger the covenant to foreclose. Good thing that I love about this is that's not me having to do that. They take that burden on. Early in my career, shortly after the Great Recession, we had to foreclose on one of these Mello-Roos districts, and it was like 200 units, 200 parcels. It was a nightmare.
I can imagine.
And to not have to go through that, to have the benefits of the district, the financing district, but not having the burden of the administration, including the downside of foreclosure, that's just such an upside to me. And I'm curious if James, I would venture a guess, because it doesn't happen often. We had some odd language in our bond covenant. Normally, nowadays, the covenant, there's a threshold, 5% or something. But this particular bond covenant didn't have that threshold, so we were required to foreclose. Anyways.
Dustin, do you see, we've heard a lot here about all the upsides and the good reasons for doing it. Do you see a downside, or where is the district's risk here, if there is any?
I'm not seeing a downside. I mean, is there a way you could do it cheaper? I don't know. I don't think so offhand.
The downside, what you'll hear, and I'm always a little suspect about this opinion, but I'm happy to share it, is that you will hear people, especially individual bond counsel or the financial planner people, indicate that the downside of SCIP is that you lose local control over what's kind of included in the bond issue itself. From my experience, I worked in an area with huge bond districts and huge bonds issued. I don't see that. I don't understand the statement, especially when you take into account the significant mismanagement that can occur on the agency side of this managing the administrative portion of the district. I think that risk is much higher than any kind of local control concern. But mind you, these are people who make a lot of money off of individual bond issuances.
Right.
So it's to their benefit that you.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that part.
Having done both SCIP and as well, and there's also another program that's called BOLD that's very similar. Having done both BOLD and SCIP and individual bond issuances, from my professional experience, I would always go with one of those. It's more hands-off, and you're out of the big risk, because the biggest risk is mismanaging it.
Sounds like a desperate criticism.
They're taking their consulting work away, right?
Yeah.
I can see that, from the perspective of the city,
Yeah.
where it's just, you have more development impact fees, but as a water district, I don't see that. I mean, our interest is infrastructure and capacity fees, that's it. We're not collecting any other development impact fees. So
Have we had any comments from the cities or county about this?
I've spoken with Tim Kaiser from Grass Valley. They had, in fact, already adopted the resolution to participate in the program previously, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. At that time, they utilized the resolution that relied on the formation of an assessment district versus a community facilities district. And there is a more benefit, over the past 10 years, most agencies have transferred from doing assessment districts to community facilities districts, because there is a little bit more flexibility in the rate and apportionment of the assessments once they're calculated based off the impact fees, which is more concerning for a city than for us. If that's just state, we're talking infrastructure costs and one impact fee where they're talking about a lot more fees. So with assessment districts, they're subject to Prop 218, and you're required to indicate that there is a special benefit that is received by the parcels participating in the district that is apportioned to the cost of the assessment itself. And so you have to do these annual engineers reports and do all of this. There's more things to do and a higher threshold for substantiating the apportionment of the assessment itself. And so the city of Grass Valley, they adopted the resolution to do an assessment district. I did share with Tim, just from my experience, having dealt in-depth with assessment districts and community facilities districts, that, my recommendation for him would be to adopt a new resolution going to community facilities district, but I'm not sure where he's at on that. I don't know, James, if you had talked to Tim after we last spoke.
I have not heard back from Tim on that issue.
Do you know if Nevada County is a member of this group?
I don't believe Nevada County is, James, are they?
They're a member to CSCDA, our authority, but they have not opted into the program. The main impetus, as Jennifer pointed out, is when a project like Loma Rica comes forward. So there haven't been any projects in the unincorporated county that have use for this product as of yet, but they are a member to CSCDA.
When you get down to the higher development areas, Placer, Sacramento County, it's much more.
The staff report references a map of the proposed district. I didn't see a map. So I'm wondering how large of a geographic area is this actually going to be? No, I mean, it will be outside the boundaries of the Loma Rica Ranch project?
No.
So it's just the Loma Rica Ranch. So we're doing this just for this one development.
Remember, there has to be a vote for the formation of the actual district.
Well, I was going to ask that. What is the vote? The vote by whom?
The director, the developer.
Well, I understand, but so the property owner owns whatever it is, 150 acres or something, and so they just vote to do it, as opposed to, the vote, I guess, will take place before the individual parcels are created.
Yes, in this particular situation with Loma Rica, there is one property owner, right?
Correct.
So they are going to, and I've been through this a ton of times, it's kind of funny, when the votes come in, You have to read it in a public hearing. We are not gonna have to do this. CSDA will do this.
Right.
And you have the one positive vote from the one voter, right?
It's a fiction,
Yeah.
because there's only one property owner.
Right,
Right.
I'm more used to these bonds Belarus bonds putting on existing developments to finance something else.
Now, in Karen's example, is the case where it was gonna be for a district-funded water line extension or something like that. Yes, each parcel owner gets mailed a ballot, and then they have to resubmit the ballot.
Because it's a tax that then they will be obligated to pay on their parcel. It gets layered in with their property tax.
Yeah, so facilities districts are 2/3 vote, whereas assessment districts are majority. However, once the district is formed, if you're going to vote to increase an assessment under an assessment district, your vote is weighted by how much you already pay in. So with apportioning fees or costs within an assessment district, you typically do it by square footage as opposed to having more kind of blanket assessments as you would in a facilities district. Facilities districts, because they're more like a tax, you have a little bit more flexibility.
And what are our costs? I'm thinking mainly of Dustin for the participation in creating the documents and the resolutions and the contracts and all of that. What are our costs?
I don't think it'll be very much. James can probably weigh in here, but they have template agreements, one of which is in your
Right.
Agenda packet. So I think the time is now.
Uh-huh.
Attending this meeting, reviewing these documents. There may be a little bit of time in the future if, for example, if Loma Rica moves forward, we need to populate that template with specifics. It will probably cross my desk, I would assume, so. But in comparison to forming a district individually, by ourselves,
Well, we probably wouldn't do that, so I don't think
we have done it in the past.
we have, but I'm guessing we wouldn't do that for one.
It's usually a pretty unique situation.
Yeah.
And the last experience, I think, is 2007.
Was that Cement Hill?
Cement Hill.
Go flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that was.
2007-ish, and the board pivoted from that. I don't think that was a good experience. Predated me, but the
Right.
board pivoted to the district finance water line. So, but my point there is, if the district wanted to continue doing this in-house potentially, or reserving it as an in-house option, I actually don't do that work. We go out and retain bond counsel. They help us form the district. They issue the bonds for us. You have a financial consultant that's a part of the team. And those fees are all rolled into the issuance, but
It's more expensive.
it's quite expensive.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, is so whatever fees that we, are charged or accumulate as a result of participation, can that be reimbursed through this process?
So there's no fees or anything, so our costs are gonna be limited to Dustin, Doug, and I's time, which cumulatively is probably gonna be less than 10 hours of work. So it's not something we would probably it would cost us more to get that reimbursed than it would to get reimbursement for it,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to formation of a bond. Bond counsel alone for a bond issuance
Right.
ourselves is like $85,000.
Yeah, I know, we
And then
went
you have-
through that.
Yeah,
before.
50,000 for the financial person.
Yeah.
It starts racking up. You're looking at 250, 300,000 bucks.
Yep.
Can I be,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Teresa.
No, go ahead, I've got other questions, but if there's something that feeds in, go ahead.
So I just want to be clear. This is a one-time request for the Loma Rica. Okay, so this gives us the funding mechanism for any development coming down the pipe. Okay.
And even with your example, as a neighborhood who wants service, we could then have them go into this program if they were going to vote in the affirmative to form it.
Okay.
It's a great tool.
Would we then have to enlarge the district?
We are not forming the district, so CSDA forms the district
Okay.
specific to each application that comes
Okay.
into
I
this
see.
program.
Okay, that's helpful.
The item before the board today is just to participate in the program, and then if that is approved, then each new opportunity, development project, neighborhood funded water line, whatever it is, they plug in on a one-by-one basis, and the district is formed only over that impacted area.
So like one of the other big projects is the Dorsey Marketplace. It has commercial, but it also has residential units. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but, so if they wanted to do that, then we would have our own structure created, and then they could just come up and apply through CSDA.
A separate district. So
And they would
Loma
form their own
Rica
separate district for the Dorsey Marketplace.
Correct. Yep,
Anybody
so they
want-
submit an application has to have the projected cost, fees that you're paying for, or the infrastructure, and then they submit the application to CSDA. If it's a competitive bond issuance, they might not get picked up, they might get bumped to the next one, then that's on the CSDA side of the house as opposed to us dealing with it.
I see.
We have to be responsible for verifying the costs, verifying the reimbursement, and for an infrastructure acquisition agreement, if there's actual infrastructure that's being constructed underneath this bond issuance, so that we acquire that infrastructure once it's actually constructed.
Yeah.
So when we acquire the infrastructure, then who does the maintenance of that? Like if, let's say, there was some issues that they didn't do the right fittings or whatever, we wouldn't take it until or our team had inspected it, so that any costs of maintenance or upgrades or whatever that might be needed would be borne by the developer.
Not maintenance, once we acquire the
In the
pipeline,
first year,
yeah.
there's a maintenance bond, a warranty bond effectively. So if there's anything that fails in that first year.
That's what
They will be coming back and fixing on their dime.
The developer.
The developer,
Assuming
correct.
they're still there.
Correct. But otherwise, the normal operations and maintenance of the system, especially once the 1 year's up, then that would be on.
That makes sense to me. I was wondering,
Yeah,
you got to my point.
That's part of our standards is the 1 year.
1 year.
The bond or the cash deposit, et cetera, that they put in that allows us, if should they not come back and fix the problem in that 1 year period, that we can go in and fix it and get reimbursed for it.
Okay, so what I heard you say is then they have to, in addition to whatever this program is, they have a responsibility to put up a bond, a maintenance bond. Again, if they skip town.
It's typically like 20% of
Okay.
the construction cost, typically 20% of the construction cost is the construction.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it can be a true bond, which most folks do get.
Yeah,
Some smaller ones, they will give us a cash deposit that we'll hold.
I
And then
see.
release it after the 1 year's up. We'll do a final walkthrough at the end of the 1 year, to make sure everything's still there. If we need a box that needs to be fixed, some of those types of things, or it's been busted, we'll come back and take care of it.
well, I just thank you all. You know, this was such a new concept for me that I had, a lot of questions, and so I appreciate everybody's patience and time in educating me, and hopefully everybody else benefited by it, to understand this a little bit better. It's kind of like, what? What is this?
And I apologize, I'm so used to it from doing large development, didn't even cross my mind that it would be a whole new program to this area, so the questions are
Mhm.
appreciated.
Well, I really like that this could also be utilized by, like, if 50 property owners out North Bloomfield Road wanted to do this, they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the other plus side for me. So I was concerned that we were just doing this for one single developer and we would take a lot of hits, especially with the language that, if you would address this, I would appreciate it, Jennifer.
Yeah, Director Heck brought up a concern regarding a benefit.
On page 3.
On page 3, there is a benefit noted that, it says,
It says district's competitive advantage in attracting new development. And I said, we're not land use or general plans, this is not even appropriate for us to
Well,
think about attracting new
but
development.
it's water development for,
No, well, hold on,
Serving
but I'm
our
just
people.
saying, this
So
is,
that was
this is
just
land
that was just a copy and cut and paste job.
Yeah,
That.
But I really wanted to bring that up for those who are listening, because that is really a misnomer.
That's not the intent.
But
That is
Where's it
the,
cut and paste from?
their website.
oh, okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you, I'm done. My questions have been answered, thank you.
Director Peters.
So let me just, like, as Director Heck mentioned, this is brand new to me, I don't understand any of it, but, and to find that there's absolutely no downside, it's, something's too good to be true, but my question is, so it does it impact the timing of when we get our capacity fees or our repayment? It doesn't impact the timing, it just, what is, so this project, what is, for the district, if it doesn't impact the capacity fee, it doesn't help us get any funding any sooner, if the project takes its winding road, or the developer goes bankrupt or something, we still, this district, like the Loma, the specific district, does it just run in perpetuity until such time someone picks it back up and runs with it?
I'm not quite understanding your question. So if the infrastructure wasn't constructed, does the district just run? Or the district, so once, in this particular situation, when you do a formation of a district, you have to write the specifics of what the assessment is being collected for. In this particular situation, when they do the formation document, CSDA is only gonna put in there, it is to pay this, to fund this infrastructure and to pay off this bond over this term. And then once that is completed and the debt obligations of the district is gone, essentially the district gets dissolved because there's nothing else that you can legally collect the fees for, unless the district participants that live within there vote to have some other bond issuance for something else. You typically don't see that, especially with this type of a project. That's something you'd see in more like 2,000 to 3,000 acre. Sometimes you'll see this double bond issuance included in the original formation documents. Or, for example, if there was a community facilities district that was formed for long-term maintenance and operation fees, then it runs forever. In this particular situation, the district only runs until such time the debt obligation is paid off.
And that's typically 20 to 30 years.
Just depends on what the market, how much you're funding, what's going on in the market at the time.
So Director Peters, I just view this as adding another option, financing option. It's not a requirement. The district could say, for whatever reason in the future, no, we don't like this particular option for that development. It doesn't preclude the district from forming its own districts if it wanted to, a Melrose district or an assessment district. That's still another option available to a developer or an existing development. So the benefits that I see with this particular option, which is also new to me, is there's economy that's gained from the scale. You know, when the district forms a Melrose district, there's a lot of cost involved in that because it's not something we do day in and day out. Whereas these folks, that is their job. They're doing this on a statewide scale. I think you mentioned they issue twice a year, so you're getting lumped up with other issuance. It's bundled, it's pooled, and that's on the kind of formation and issuance side. And then on the back end, the administration, as I said, you've got these people that are specialized doing this day in and day out. So I see it as an option. It's not a requirement, but I think it's a pretty good option for prospective development.
Another tool in the box.
Right.
Yep. It's a great one, too.
Have you had experience with it other places?
No.
It is a really good tool. I mean, I've had a significant
but they have.
experience with both sides, with doing individual bond issuances and SCIP as well as both. It's a good tool. From my perspective, it's a better tool just because you don't have the administrative burden.
And that's why when I heard that part, that's where
Right.
that tipped me over right away, because we're looking all the time to farm out.
So there's two different, is there other companies? I mean, is this, we don't know. So you said Bold is another?
Yeah, typically you would actually be part of both, and then the developer decides which one they want to be part of. There's some advantages to each one. You see more commercial going to Bold than into SCIP. It gets down into nuances of financing, but like in the city of Lincoln, we were part of both, Bold and SCIP.
Both under the CS.
Now, Bold is not out of CSDA. James, I know you know who Bold is out of.
CMFA, the California Municipal Finance Authority. They're another JPA.
It's a different JPA. It's a whole different program, but it's fairly similar.
Are these the only two that do this kind of stuff?
Just as far as the Joint Power Authority, the only two in California that I know of. James, do you know of any others?
No, that is correct. There's only two. These are, they're difficult to pull together and to manage. So not a lot of people want to take these on.
Isn't it correct, James? One of the other benefits of CSDA, they do each bond issuance has a layer included in the bond that is for basically charitable investments, isn't it?
That's Bold. That's CMFA. That's the other JPA.
That's cool. Okay, I get confused. CMFA does provide some investments in the community.
Can I go back to Dustin's comment? So you were saying that proposals come to us, we become a member of this group, then proposals come to us for approval. And so we have the option of saying, yes, we support being part of a bond issuance for Loma Rica. Is that, I mean, you're
Section
approved?
today is just becoming a participant.
Right.
I would assume that the Loma Rica specific or any other future development would come again to you, because they're separate agreements. I think in their
Okay.
terminology, it's an acquisition agreement. In our lingo, it's a conveyance agreement. So these would come to you, and they're discretionary.
Right.
You could say no, I don't know why you would.
Right.
You could say no if there was some unique situation where it didn't make sense from the district's perspective.
Okay, thank you. I guess that I couldn't help but go to item 11 on the
Me too.
capacity charges, because to me, these are, I'm glad they came on the same day to us, because I have a different mindset about the capacity fees if I know that the capacity fees can be financed through this mechanism, but a developer may not qualify for this program or avail themselves. And so, anyway, I couldn't help but say, well, if you can fund the capacity fees through this mechanism, why wouldn't we have people paying up front?
Right.
You know, but if you have, you know, as your example you've talked about, Doug, is only have one parcel that's not gonna qualify for this program. So, I mean, then I started getting, oh boy, which do we do on number 11?
It's conflating so the SCIP program, yes, it better enables them to pay fees earlier for cash flow reasons.
Right.
With the capacity fee, as you just stated, that applies to any more than 4 parcels or greater. And so most likely, you know, it's gonna be hard unless they were bundling all of their fees and infrastructure costs for them to meet the threshold to be able to participate in SCIP. They're kind of two different things.
And even if, and even if a large development like Loma Rica came in, they could still choose, even if it was pay as you go when you request time of service, they could still decide to go ahead and be part of the bond and pay for all the capacity fees up front. There'd be nothing that would prevent them from doing that.
And most of the time they will. If they're gonna participate in SCIP or BOLD or bond issuance, they're more likely to pay the
They're not
fees
gonna wanna
upfront.
build, you know, they're gonna, it's all upfront at a cost, so having to build 15 or 20 lots right off the bat, that's still a substantial amount of money that they're gonna have to pony up for, as if they have in the program.
I have another question. Who's getting anxious, Rich?
Sorry, Rich.
Sorry, Rich.
It won't be too much longer. Don't worry.
Call Maria's.
And this is for Dustin. In the event that the board thinks this is a good idea and moves forward, are we able to include language that the Loma Rica proposal is subject to them also including our water lines that we want?
So, no.
You
This
said
is
one of the big advantage was getting this water main.
This is participation in the program. A subsequent item would come forward with the Loma Rica item. So the subsequent
So the
item,
subsequent item, if we could say, okay, we'll play ball as long as you also.
they've
They've already agreed.
already agreed.
Well, I understand that they're agreeing in principle, but in writing, would we put that in?
No, we wouldn't want to do
They
that.
could still come and fund that water line extension out of their own pocket,
Right.
if for some reason that made sense to them. We would still have an agreement that they would be constructing, and then it would be designed to our standards and built, and then, given
To include our
But
main.
they, for some reason, may have a reason why they wouldn't bond it, that they would just pull out of cash flow to pay for it.
Right, they could do whatever they
They can do
wanted.
whatever they want, so I don't know if we could specifically state in the document that.
Well, but how do we guarantee, this is a little bit separate, but how do we guarantee that we get that water line, that main line funded?
I'm talking about the
I'm talking about the transmission line, thank you.
Transmission.
Thank you.
So we would have an agreement, typically like with our conveyance agreement, we'd have in there how we would fund that, how we would reimburse them for that. And usually, and it can vary, part of it can be we'll credit capacity fees. If you owe $1 million in capacity fees and you're gonna develop $800,000 worth of infrastructure for us, outside of what you need, then in the conveyance agreement, it spells that out.
I see,
We're going to
okay.
pay you for that work once it's completed. And
Okay, I just want to make sure that we get that as part of the deal.
But they're not paying for that
No, I
transmission
understand
main.
they're not.
Okay.
Or the
But-
construction of it, or materials, are they gonna install it for us, or when they're
Well,
working?
they're gonna install it, but we're paying for all that.
Right.
That's where it's infrastructure acquisition. We
I get it.
acquire it
Yeah,
after
yeah.
it's constructed.
They have no benefit from it.
Right.
We do have.
Okay, thank you.
And it would make sense to coordinate with them on their own infrastructure. I'm assuming there's gonna be conflicts. with
Yeah,
that.
and typically, right, they'll have to do, they'll use their own contractor that's already on site doing work, right, so they're going to put bids on that, but understanding that any work that they do for us in terms of we're paying for, it's gonna be at prevailing wage rate. So when they develop the main distribution system, that will be as a contractor to developer, they'll pay whatever rate they get. When they pay for it, then to build the transmission main that we pay for, it will be at prevailing wage. So the contractor could be working at two different rates within the same project.
So there's a county.
Not for us, they just need to show approval, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, any more discussion?
No, I'm done, thank you.
I'm
Okay.
done.
We're going to conduct a public hearing at this time for those that are watching. So we will now open the public hearing to discuss this matter. If you're interested in the home reclamation green infrastructure program, the SCIP program, star 9 on your phone. And I see we have one hand already. Just go. Yes.
Barbara?
Good
Barbara,
morning,
are you-
Chair Beerwagon and directors. So I would really like to encourage you to adopt the SCIP. I think it's just another tool in the toolbox. It's certainly not going to be a one-fits-all for all of the projects. So it's just another, it's another option for developers. But for those smaller projects, this program just isn't going to fit for them. So as we consider item 11, please take that into consideration. These are both really good options to help with the housing that we so critically need here. So thank you, and I encourage you to approve this.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else like to comment? At this time, star 9 on your phone.
I have a question of staff. Did we receive any written comments on this?
I have not, did you receive it?
Oh, we did receive one written comment that was forwarded to the board. It was in support of the item.
Oh.
Right, that was from
Yeah.
the engineering company.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And it's on
Wood Rogers, is it wood from Wood Rogers?
Oh, Roger.
It was a wood, but not from Rogers.
Okay, anyone else like to comment? You commented, okay. Anyone else like to comment?
We have, Mr. Wood has just raised his hand.
Go ahead, Mr. Wood.
Yeah, this is Martin Wood with SCO. I just want to echo Barbara's comments. This SCIP program has been successful in a lot of jurisdictions just to allow some of these sizable projects to essentially do self-taxation, but to finance some of these big ticket items. And Truckee is a good example that's been utilizing that. And you guys are no obligation to take on these different projects, but by entering the program, it gives you just one more tool in the toolbox. So I support the district joining this and think it's an overall good thing for projects in the future that you might consider. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
How long was it advertised? Was there, because it's a public meeting?
Yeah, so
To advertise it?
there was, that's in the packet, at least the what went out in the paper. On the back page, the last page, it was published on the 6th. I guess
Can we, are we done with the public hearing and then we can
We
return?
have no
Yep.
hands raised. Yes, we need to end the public hearing. Sorry, bad question. Anyone else like to comment at this time? Star 9 on your phone. All right, seeing none, we'll end the public hearing.
So maybe to finish.
Yes, go ahead.
Peters, yeah, it was placed in the union, last week. I believe, and James can confirm with this, I think it's a 5-day notice requirement. They get notice 5 days prior to the hearing for this particular type of, document, so we have done that a couple days there, so it had been, public on 6, yeah. I think it says it on that sheet.
It says January 6th.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna move to adopt a resolution authorizing the district to become a California Statewide Communities Development Authority Program participant and join the statewide Community Infrastructure Program, authorizing CSCDA to accept application from property owners, conduct special assessment proceedings, and levy assessments and special taxes and to form assessment districts and community facilities districts within the territory of Nevada Irrigation District, embodying a joint community facilities agreement setting forth the terms and conditions of community facilities district financings, approving the form of acquisition agreement for use when applicable, and authorizing related actions.
I second that.
Chris, did you write that all there?
It's all right here.
We're confirming for the record that, the director read the recommended language. May have missed resolution number 2022-04. That may have been my hearing as well.
Right,
Probably will.
because I was reading from the recommendation.
Moved and seconded, Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Yes, Division 4?
I'm gonna say yes, but I'd also like to, there's a lot of news material to hear and to act on at the very stage. Going forward, I really appreciate having more time to ponder. But yes.
Division 1?
Yes, and I'm delighted actually to know about this program, and I think we've got to give a lot of credit to Jennifer for thinking about it and bringing it forward. Our community is desperately needing housing, and if this can help move forward those housing developments, gosh, that's great. So absolute yes, thank you.
Division 5?
Yes,
Division 3?
Aye.
Division 2?
Aye. All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, guys.
Next item number, where'd my sheet go? Item number 11, Water Service Rules and Regulations, Section 10.07, capacity charges. Doug, here again, didn't even have to move.
So, as you're familiar with the last meeting in December, we had an initial discussion about whether we should make any changes to our current rules and regulations for prepayment of capacity fees, which require any subdivision that's greater than 4 parcels to prepay those before we would accept the system as part of the overall conditions of the remaining agreement. In that, the board requested that we reach out to several agencies to see what they have done or what their current practice is. On the second page, we reached out to 6. So we reached out to PCWA. Basically, PCWA accepts it prior to the acceptance of the facilities. So they operate in a similar manner that the district does.
Currently.
Currently, correct.
Okay.
El Dorado Irrigation District does accept the system prior to the fees being paid, but there's a little nuance, and I tried to explain it here in the staff report, but the county won't issue a final map until a meter award letter is completed, and the meter award letter comes from PIE. PIE won't give the meter award letter until they receive their capacity fees. So they may actually accept the system and have it in their system and being operated, but they won't offer this meter award letter until they receive all their connection fees, all their capacity fees. The county won't final map without the letter from EID. So it's effectively, they're getting it prior to, they're getting it after acceptance, but prior to any final map being recorded. So there's nothing that gets billed until they receive their fees effectively.
More similar to ours.
It's similar to ours, right? But other than they may construct it, accept it, and You know, in theory, it may be 6 months or a year maybe before the amount gets recorded or wanted to be recorded, that they would own the system and not have any usage on it, per se, until they get this award letter. So, it's a little different. I tried to explain it as best I could, but ultimately, the idea is basically that they're gonna get their fees prior to the map being final, prior to any development or building permits being issued. Modesto Irrigation District, actually, the city of Modesto was responsible for their, and they do it at time of building permit. So they do it at time of service, basically. South Feather Water and Power, they're paid when service is requested, so they're paying when they get time of service, they come in, they pay their fees at that time. Paradise Irrigation pays up front, prior to acceptance, just like us, so they're similar to us. And then Truckee PUD also pays at time of service effectively, so when the building permit is issued. So it's a hodgepodge. There's a few that do it our way, there's a few that do it at basically at time of service. So we have in the package, I have a red line version. If the board decides they want to move forward with simply changing the existing rules and regulations 10.07, we've got a red line and then just a clean line because it's easier to read a clean line version. So there's not much in terms of changes to it's only the one section, and you see it as an attachment there, basically one paragraph. Basically what we'll just say is that all you need to be doing is time of service when you come in and put an application for water service in. Part of the requirements for you to get that service would be to pay all your fees, which would include capacity fees, if you chose to go that route. There's also the conveyance agreement itself. Again, it's just reflective of the fact that if we're going to pay at time of service, then there's only really one Article 3 that we have to deal with. The other two just kind of get scratched out. Then right at the end of the conveyance agreement, under Article 15, for the conveyance, and this is all the things that they have to do for us to accept the system, we would just eliminate number 4, which currently says you have to prepayment of capacity. So there's not a lot in terms of changes to the regs and to the document. Really just now whether the board is comfortable with moving forward with eliminating the prepayment requirement or to keep that. Again, there's not much in terms of different staff time and effort, whether they're prepaid or not. If we get prepayment, then it's a little more work just because we have to tag all the parcels that are prepaid, so that when they come in for service down the road, that we'll know they've already prepaid the fees. I mean, they don't have to pay those components. Otherwise, it would just be another parcel that would pay all the fees necessary. So staff doesn't have a big opinion one way or the other than we would recommend not some additional hybrid. Like 10 parcels, because we're going to keep running into that trouble.
You want the hybrid?
Director Johansson.
So if you go to time of service, which I prefer, that doesn't preclude someone from paying earlier.
Correct.
And so you kind of get everything. I mean, they can come in and prepay if they want to fix their costs, if we're going to increase our charges, and then they can just hold it there, or they can wait until the time of service to pay it, which is probably more of a benefit to us.
Correct, and we've done that in the past, typically when a developer project is being constructed and we get to December, typically reach out to them and say capacity fees are going to be going up in January. If you prepay them today, you can prepay them today, that's the rate you get. Otherwise, you will pay the current rate.
So this gives the applicant choice, and they make the financial decision when they want to pull the trigger.
Correct.
And pay us, which I don't think you can get better than that.
Here's
On these capacity fees, this is after, so the initial infrastructure is installed, the distribution system, all of that is installed, not installed.
So
If we change it to
if we change it to, it would be all installed and accepted by the district.
and accepted by the district.
But remember, the infrastructure is typically for the development itself is paid for by the developer. This is capacity fees that are related to other infrastructure, water storage tanks, water treatment, that benefit the property.
As we noted, the capacity of Elizabeth and George yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
So-
Right, and so this is also doesn't impact maintenance, right? This is not funds for maintaining the system. Those those are not collected until service starts being provided.
Right, the capacity fees are not used for any maintenance, flushing, et cetera.
Richard Johansson?
Yeah, so if I went to buy a car, I can lease it, I can buy it, I can spread out whatever, I can pay it off entirely. Do we have financing available for someone who wants to finance this through a third party or through us?
We
So
currently
we had
do.
that discussion, right, last night with regards to, by the way, just for the record, 7 years is what we used to do in terms of financing. It's actually 10 now for capacity fees. So if some individual wants to come in and pay for their connection fees or capacity fees, there is an opportunity for them to finance them through the district up to a certain amount and over a 10-year period. 10-year period?
Yeah, I think it's $20,000 over 10 years.
Yeah.
20,000 over 10 years, interest rate is,
It's set at LAIF. This is a program I do think should be brought back. There is, I do have some concern with districts doing financing from the perspective that charging interest rate at LAIF, we could likely make more on the market in an average year. Additionally, there is the cost of money, right? So
We can't,
I don't think we should be a bank, but
no,
Right.
My question is, could we, what's it called, the floating interest rate down?
you know,
you
amortized?
could do a variable interest rate.
Variable.
The other challenge with any of these loans, and we have, I don't know, close to, off the top of my head, I think it was about 200 of them for, between the district water finance line projects as well as these individual ones. There is a fairly significant administrative burden on an annual basis from an accounting perspective. We have to account for each one of those, receivables, and we have to monitor it and do a lot of accounting to keep track of it. We're not a bank, we shouldn't be loaning money.
That's not our business.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm a
So-
huge fan of this because we benefited 3 times in our property from this.
But no, but
Are we covering our costs?
But wait, does that relate to this?
That doesn't necessarily relate to this particular discussion.
But I'm asking, but let me finish. I agree, we shouldn't be the bank, but we can work through a bank or lending institution to do that job for us.
That's a different.
Yeah, I would have some concerns in
When you
that-
bring it back.
I think that's a good one to bring back.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the current interest rate?
Right now,
It depends.
it was like 1.2%,
Yeah, which is still better than the bank, but we're looking forward.
but there's a cost of money.
I agree.
Right. And we only have
Still off.
that we can
Still off.
much.
Moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only in DC is there no cost.
Rich, are you through on topic?
Yeah.
One more question. So how does this impact current ratepayers and taxpayers? I mean, we have these,
Capacity fee?
with this item, this capacity. What is the upside or downside or pro or con to, how does changing this, what impact, if any, does it have on?
Very minimal impacts.
Like, what would they be if they even were missing?
The current capacity fees are kept in a separate fund, although it's a sub-fund of the parent fund, which is Fund 10, but we are now allocating, the biggest impact would be associated with any revenue related to interest that you could have if you invested the money upfront. Say you got 3 years, you have 3 years of investment, but it doesn't get assigned to the operations fund anyways, Fund 10, which is where the ratepayers and taxpayers live. That, now that we're actually allocating investment interest over the funds proportional to the amount of their total fund balance and all the pooled cash, that investment revenue would be allocated to that fund anyways. So I don't see,
What if these treatment plants or?
The maintenance part of it, the flushing of the system.
it doesn't come out of that fund.
It doesn't come out of that fund, but in terms of the ratepayers in general, they're paying for us to maintain our system and flush our system.
But you don't start recovering revenue for maintenance until you have hookups anyway, because the revenue is recovered through
So,
ratepayers.
no, correct, but
Our
if
customers have to pay for it.
yeah, if it's a.
Mhm.
They
you know,
do
we
anyway,
accept it.
is my point.
Right. It would be such, it's such a minimal amount of time and effort to flush a small development system. Yeah.
And for the perspective of the ratepayers aren't paying for maintenance, even if we go back to or stick with payment at recording of final map, the ratepayers are still paying for flushing of that line until there's sufficient revenue coming in from time of service from the ratepayers, because they pay for maintenance through their rates or, you know, property tax theoretically.
Director Hull, have you weighed in yet?
No?
Would you like to weigh in?
I'm inclined to support this change. I think that, I just think it's reasonable to do. They're paying for the infrastructure during construction, so we're not out any money. And it helps to facilitate, I think, positive development in our community.
That was agreeing with Director Eck on this. If that does that, then go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep. We do have a caller. If you'd like to comment, start on your phone. I see Keone, you're on. You need to, there you go.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to address you briefly this morning. For those of you that don't know, I'm a local general contractor, and I many times have the opportunity to get involved in projects very early on to help create the budgets, particularly for the vertical construction. But having that opportunity, I see these budgets, and this particularly affects smaller projects. These smaller projects, they struggle with paying these fees up front. Just to give you a sense, a local 34 lot project, the capacity fees are almost $500,000. And so the developer's choice is, do I either deplete my available cash, or do I finance this, which just adds to my cost? So this is really a huge assistance to help these projects go forward with really no identifiable risk to either NID or to the future home buyer. The suggestion, I believe, is that these fees would be paid in full at the time of the building permit. So we can't even start building a home until the pot's right and all the fees are paid. So we just think that this is a huge opportunity, totally disconnected from the previous issue and conversation. This is another tool to help projects with their financing to be able to move forward, to help our community with our desperately needed housing issue. And I really appreciate the opportunity to address this. One last item. Please consider that our little economy here is smaller than some of the surrounding districts and some of the examples that we discussed earlier. So it's probably more valuable and helpful for us than maybe even others. So thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Keone. Martin Wood, you're next.
Yes, good morning, board members. Yeah, I want to echo Keone's comments. We do a lot of estimates on different projects, you know, small, medium, and large, and facility fees paying early like this is really a difficult task for many developments. And, you know, as we're trying to, in the community, try to get more of these residential projects off the ground, one thing that's really difficult is a lot of times the construction loans won't allow fees to be financed in those loans. So it really is a hit to the developer, their working capital, their cash, all those type of things up front. Paying those may make the difference of whether they can get their construction loan and actually go forward or not. So it's kind of a timing thing. It's, you know, the first phase or getting the initial infrastructure, getting these projects off the ground is always the hardest. And if they have a little bit more time to basically get the infrastructure, get the roads in, get the project basically solvent and ready, then it goes to the stage of building permits where it's a separate loan and it's much more easy for them to finance and move forward. So, similar to sewer connection fees and those type of things where, the city's not treating sewer or anything like that until somebody's actually connected. If you guys took on a policy like this, I think it would be a win-win in terms of the district actually collecting more fees, because we'd see some of these smaller and medium projects that they would just get over the hump of viability for that first phase for them to say, I can finance this. I have enough capital, I can move forward. So I think this is a huge benefit for both the district and the community. And I highly recommend that you guys adopt this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Boatwright, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm with the Loma Rica Ranch project with Castle Companies. And I think if the Grass Valley region is going to reach the level of housing that it needs to support local businesses and jobs and cultural activities, and even just its basic housing needs, it's important not to impose the large capacity fees up front. This goes for both, I think, larger and even smaller to medium-sized projects, especially when the impacts from the project to the district haven't even occurred yet. So I would encourage the board to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Boatwright. Anyone else like to comment today? Start on your phone. Last chance, if you'd like to comment on the proposed changes to rules and regs concerning prepayment of capacity fees. Start on your phone. All right.
I do have a question for
Director Heck, go ahead.
NCCA has their hand up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair Beerwagon. I just wanted to weigh in. You've heard from me a lot on this topic, and I just wanted to encourage you to support it. I think it's there's no impact to the district, and certainly no impact to the person who's buying those homes, since those fees will be paid at the time that they apply for service, well before, as the time that building permits are issued. So just like to encourage you to support it, and thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone else? Comments this time, start on your phone. All right, I will entertain a motion.
Well, Mr. Chair, I will make the motion to approve this, but I do have just a clarifying question for staff. Anytime that we have a change in policy, and what I'm thinking about is Mr. Allen mentioned this, and I know that there was, I think, a 34 or 36 unit development that paid all their capacity fees up front right off of Ridge Road at Slate Creek, I think. So what if they came back as a district and said, hey, you guys changed your policy, can I have a refund until I get, so they have more working capital?
I would assume it's no different than you applying for a building permit and then the code changes to make something simpler. You can't go back and request a change after the fact. I mean,
Yeah,
you've already paid their
not
fees
retro.
upfront.
No,
There's no
grant should or shouldn't be, I'm just saying, I can
Currently, it's-
anticipate getting
yeah.
requests.
Currently, as the policy is written, that would not provide for any opportunity for grandfathering. We would have had to specifically include that in the policy. So if that were to come as a request, we would have to come to the board to request permission to do that. I want to have the authority to issue that refund.
Likewise, the current capacity, or conveyance agreement spelled out specifically to
Yeah.
prepay it, and that's what was approved by the board, so
Right.
they would have to come back and try to request a change
Yeah, it's
in the approved document.
It's really close to the time.
Well, it is, the timing came really close, and so that's why I actually was feeling sorry for the person, because they put up a big chunk of money, and I thought, golly, anyway. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm really pleased to make the motion. I think this is a good change in policy for us to modify the water service rules and regulations on prepayment of capacity charges such that that payment is done at time of water service or building permit with, and y'all, water service, okay, at water service.
And also,
Oh, second.
Okay, 2 seconds.
Aaron?
Any further discussion by the board? Madam Secretary, call for.
Division 4? Aye. Division 1?
Yes.
Division 5?
Yes.
Division 3?
aye.
Division 2?
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Doug. Good job. Okay, General Manager's report.
I just have a couple of items. I'm going to provide one quick report out and then, or actually 2 quick report outs, and then, Mr. Close will also provide an update, because I know we're always all interested in water storage and precipitation. The only thing I wanted to report out is we are having some significant struggles with our current financial system. Apparently, the district did not purchase the upgrades for the financial system, for the past, 7-10 years. And we are still not at a point where we can move over to the Tyler ERP. If we were to do so before we completed the financial cleanup, we would just be making a bigger mess of the finances. And so we will be purchasing the annual upgrades. And if it exceeds my contract authority, I will come back to the board prior to doing so, but it's looking like it's not going to. So we're going to have to back purchase upgrades. What this is causing is we have had some really extensive issues with running payroll recently. The past 2 payrolls have been an absolute nightmare. So I did also want to commend the accounting department. They have been putting in piles of extra time and effort to even get payroll out. So big kudos to them for sticking with it. The system is definitely on its last legs at this point. So we are monitoring the situation. I'll keep you apprised.
Are we gonna have a, memorial service?
Yeah, I feel like I need to get some sage and some lavender candles in the
Yeah.
server room. Every time that server goes down, we're lucky it comes back up.
So there are, upgrades that, because my understanding was that they weren't supporting that anymore.
Yeah, so it's moved to the cloud, so we have a very, very old version that lives on its own little server. The server's about to die, and they no longer provide support to many aspects of it, and in fact, many of the functionality is, you can see a button, but it's grayed out and can't use it. Because when the servers go down, whether it be power or whatever happens, getting that server to come back up is super dicey. So, there were upgrades that could have been purchased, and I'm not sure at what year the upgrade would have moved off the server into the cloud. So it's more of a web-based system. So we are going to purchase, typically when you go through the process of upgrading, when you haven't bought the annual upgrades or patches, you have to back pay them for them. So it's, it's about $8,000 a year or something like that. And I'm not quite sure on how far back we stopped purchasing the upgrades. So we're going to purchase the upgrades because we're almost getting to a point where we're not functional, which is creating a lot of rework, a lot of hand-holding. So Debbie and her team, and specifically Desiree and Shauna, have been working tremendously hard with support from Lisa Ward from HR on even getting payroll out. There's been a couple of times where I thought we would be up all night writing paper checks for payroll. Yeah.
Whoa.
And do the patches and upgrades then provide the security that we need for the system for the near term?
Yeah, it'll be more secure because it'll be on the cloud and they have their own firewalls. So, for example, in the last hacking situation, if we were on the cloud, it wouldn't have been impacted. It was still okay because based on the fact that it was its own server, it didn't get attacked. We were able to stop it before then, so it wasn't compromised. But yeah, the security would be increased from that perspective.
And functionality?
Oh, functionality will be tenfold increased. We're having some very, very significant issues with the system right now.
Okay.
And then Chip, the fun stuff.
Fun stuff. Fun stuff. Pretty wet, huh?
Okay, morning, board, staff, and public. For a supply update. Maximize it here. Okay, so, I started off with, that's way down in, let me back up. Okay, so starting off with the first one, at Dolphin Lake precipitation, this is the good news. We sit at 43.46 inches of precip at that reporting station, which is 149% of average. Very, very good numbers up there. And everyone around here knows it and feels it after living through Snowmageddon. It's been good news. The unfortunate thing is the forecast looks like it's gonna start to dry up, but for now, I'm just gonna enjoy the 149% of average. The other thing I like to focus on when we look at this graph is that, we have already well surpassed last year's total by almost 10 inches of rain, and we're very close to surpassing, 2019, 2020 year as well, so that's good. Our reservoir storage is greatly improved, however, we're still lagging. We're still behind average by about 7,500 acre feet, give or take. So we still have some room to make up there, but we are at 96% of average and 66% of total capacity. Now, this slide here is our treated water use comparison, and basically, I took a lot of the lines out recently. It was getting a little crowded, a little confusing. But what you're going to see in this graphic is the dark blue shaded area is how much treated water usage was consumed in 2013. And if you remember in the last drought, that became the new baseline. Now, Director Heck, when you discussed our financials, you said treated water usage has continually gone up.
Right.
But unfortunately, our financials only considered that usage from 2015 on. If you went years prior to that, you would see that our treated water usage is actually much higher in those previous years than even what we're experiencing today. And that's proved by that top line. So in 2021, our usage in treated water consumption is actually 12% less than it was in 2013. We still have not caught back up to where we were back then.
Okay, well, thank you.
I have a question on that. On the financials, it said it was 3.8%,
Growth.
conservation,
Conservation, yeah.
and it says 13%.
Yes, okay, so let me finish through this.
Okay.
Okay, so for the month of December of 2021, we realized 13.3% reduction in treated water use as compared to 2020, just for the month of December.
Just December.
If you take the entire year, and it's not on this slide, I apologize. If you take the entire year of 2021 versus 2020, we had 5% total conservation. Okay, so let me point this out. So in this chart here, you can see the red line is 2021. And what you can see is our usage in the spring, when it was very hot, very dry, our usage was very, very high. It wasn't actually until we put in our mandatory drought conservation measures that we really started seeing people cut back. And if you look at our usage, starting July 1 and finishing out the year, you'll see that our conservation last year as compared to 2020 is actually 15% after we enacted the drought regulations.
I see.
So our customers responded. Granted, it took a little while, and once they heard that mandatory reductions were in place, they responded, they cut back, so.
It worked.
That's the good news, yeah. And you can see we finished out the year really low, and then December, we just kind of flatlined out, so that's where we're at on conservation. Now, this must be an older slide deck. Well, anyway, let me hold it. This is not the right slide. Okay, so the other news I had for you is the California Drought Monitor has changed quite drastically. It used to be a very red state, and now it's very orange, and that's good news. Most of the state still, though, is in moderate drought to severe drought. We fall in that category. We have improved quite drastically, but we're not completely out of it yet. The 8 to 14 day NOAA precipitation outlook unfortunately shows below average for our area. We're actually a target of much less than average expected.
You have that still for the.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So, that's kind of the bummer news. On the flip side, though, the 3-month forecast shows that it's a 50-50 shot. They don't really sure where we're headed in the next 3 months. I'll take that, that's better than just claiming dry. So that is my report question.
So Chip, how did raw water do in terms of conservation?
That's a great question. And it's a little bit harder to analyze, and I can come back to you with those numbers the next time around.
Okay.
We definitely had a lot of folks that volunteered to cut back on their usage, and I'll bring those numbers to you. Overall, though, the reason that's hard to analyze is in a dry year like 2021 was, a terrible dry year. Yeah, it really was. People utilized more of what they purchased. And so it's hard to say there was conservation, because people just use more what they purchased in a wet year. They don't use all what they purchased, so the numbers are very hard to compare. But we'll analyze it. We'll get some data back to you on the next round.
Thank you.
On the state dry, you know, that we're in a moderate drought, or what does it say we're in, a moderate?
So it was exceptional drought. That's the worst category. It goes one less from that is extreme drought, and then it goes severe drought. We are now classified in severe drought, and you can see it on the map.
Okay. And so my question is, it says the state says we're in severe drought, but we have above average precipitation, we have a lot of snow on the mountains, our reservoirs are, you know, pretty
Let me
full.
chime in here. So, predicting the future, right, is very difficult.
Yeah.
Is this hydrologic cycle that we're in like 2013, or is it like 2017? 2013, water year starts in October, right? October of 2012, November, December, was very similar to what we've experienced to date. Then you rolled into January 2013, it was the driest calendar year on record. Compare that with 2017, again, very similar October, November, December in 2016, excuse me. Then we roll into 2017 and we have historically wet precipitation. It breaks Oroville spillway. So we have a high pressure system building in the Pacific. That's the blob scenario. Most of the models are now aligning that there's not going to be much, if any, precipitation in January. There may be a few scattered storms here and there, but nothing significant. At a statewide level, exactly what I've just said is the statewide discussion. On, I think, the 19th, the State Water Board will reconvene and have a discussion about kind of what are the models saying, what's the forecast saying. They're trying to improve their forecasting. Just recall, even here at the local level, we missed on our runoff forecast just because the antecedent soil conditions were so dry, it just sucked up the snow melt. So the state is really trying to scramble and improve their forecasting so that they don't get surprised again. There is what's called a TUCP, Temporary Urgency Change Petition, that the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project have jointly requested. A TUCP is basically a temporary change in the terms of your water rights. What the projects are requesting is a relaxation of water quality standards in the Delta in order to preserve upstream storage. That would begin February, extend into the spring. So all that I'm saying is the state is still very much in drought mode and preparing in the event that we are in a 2013 scenario, that it does end up being dry January, February, March. And of course, they're also prepared if we end up in 2017 scenario to withdraw some of those conservation measures. But it's truly kind of a wait and see.
So it's more, so the state perspective, thank you, that's helpful, because so if I'm understanding you correctly, the state perspective is looking more, comparing it to trends of prior years as opposed to actual on-the-ground conditions.
Both, because remember on-the-ground conditions, their forecasts were so off last year. With climate change dynamics and such, they're having to revisit some of the old assumptions. And, a lot of the inflow forecasts, that's exactly what they're looking at, the inflow forecast. If you have a certain measurement of snowpack, does your long-term average of what you would normally see as far as inflow, does that still hold true in today's conditions? So.
And then an example of where the state is at is that they sent out notification early this week saying curtailments are going back in place in the valley in a few locations, even though precipitation has been above average. So they are working in real time with conditions on the ground, as well as using, I think, 2018 from a water rights diversion perspective and comparing the two to come up with their numbers. So, as Dustin said, we're still in drought as far as the state is concerned.
Let's just hope a Pineapple Express.
Yes. And one last helpful statistic this is a few weeks old now, but the December snowpack on the aid station index, which is our territory, was about 158% of average. Very, very good snowpack. But if you fast forward, if we did not receive significant continued snowpack accumulation, that's only about 50% of the April 1 average. So again, it all depends on January, February, March, what we will see as storm-wise. It could be very good or it could be poor, in which case we're still in a drought predicament.
And I think you reported last fall, it was one of you guys,
San Diego.
know how dry it was gonna be.
Yeah.
The winter forecast was for dry. And we can be lulled into this beautiful snowpack.
The state,
having record rainfall in December.
there's a climatologist, his name's Peter Swain, I think I've mentioned him in this boardroom. The state is really putting a lot of weight in his assessment, and I started following him on Twitter. He's got a very interesting Twitter feed, but he's been spot on. He said, wet October, dry November, wet December, then it's gonna dry out. And Swain, that's W-A-I-N, I believe. Yeah, and.
Is he a meteorologist?
Yeah, I think he calls himself a climatologist.
Climatologist.
He's in, I believe, in Colorado, but he's affiliated with UCLA.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Director Hick?
Thank you. So the snowpack, what is the water content of the snowpack? Is that above, below?
Well, that's a great question, and we have not done a snow survey yet. We will be doing one at the end of January.
But didn't DWR do one?
State had 20 inches,
Those are the numbers I just reported. So
Yeah, but I didn't hear the water content.
20 inches.
yeah,
I reported it's 20 inches.
Is it? Okay.
Those are all great numbers, but the reason we don't do a snow survey this early is because we just talked about things change so rapidly before irrigation season. It's better to get the numbers real time, closer to when we're actually gonna need and utilize that forecasting of that water. So, from here on out, we'll have a snow survey and the data for you on every water update until summer.
Is it true that, that you can make, or one can make, assumptions on runoff based upon the water content of the snowpack?
It's one.
She's saying no.
Wait, it's
saying
one,
yes.
it's one,
Normally.
yeah, one element.
That's the one.
I understand it's one element,
Yeah.
but,
That's the one that's flipped over last year.
Yeah, it's a little bit more of an art now than a science.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank
You're
you.
saying that 20 inches is still 50% of what our April snowpack
It
should
would
be.
be, yeah.
That's the eight, I don't know about the percent, I just know about the snowpack.
Yeah.
158, I think, was the percent of December average, but only about 50% of April 1 average.
Right.
If it didn't continue to accumulate.
Not out of the woods yet.
Thank you, Chip. Director Johansson.
Yeah, Chip? Oh,
Go ahead.
I had yeah, so 178,000 acre feet is just a couple of thousand acre feet more than what we started the year in 2020.
Yes.
So we're almost right back where we started last year.
Yeah.
Like, it's within 5 or 10%.
You can look at that slide if you like, but
Yeah.
we're pretty close to where we were. And in fact, I'd argue we're a little bit ahead of where we were last year.
Right.
We'll still have to wait and see. If the forecast holds true and continues to be dry, we will not get back to average.
Right. And so our goal was to get above 235,000 acre feet so we could have a surplus year.
Yes, but keep in mind that target number includes our reservoir storage as well as snowpack and anticipated runoff coming in.
So going forward, but last year we didn't get it, and that was, whoops, yeah. So going forward, we can have both figures. And when we do the snow survey, we'll kind of have an anticipated number that we might hit, but then we could also have the actual what's in the reservoir
Yes.
today.
Yes, and that was my point, is moving
Yeah.
forward, when I provide you these updates, not only will we have the reservoir storage, we'll also give you the snowpack content, the water content of that snowpack, and we'll utilize the state's anticipated runoff. That's how we measure what is anticipated for the summer conditions.
And the irony is that, I mean, Shasta only has 1.425 billion acre feet in it. Oroville's coming up, but there's a couple of dams that are being spilled right now for Folsom, Black Butte, for water control. Now, that recharges some of the aquifers, but some of the other aquifers aren't recharging at all. So statewide, I still think we're in much more than a moderate drought condition. So, okay, that's great. And we'll be looking at this going down the road? Drought?
So we still currently, we're in that hybrid stage 2 of the drought contingency plan. And so we do plan to keep an eye on things and come back in February for conversation.
A lot of people were a little shocked at their surcharge at the end of the year.
My report.
Well, no, but it's
Real.
And that's the thing we'll also bring back and talk about more in depth as we
yeah,
spoke earlier.
they just want to talk about it. Is there any way we have to keep on a drought resolution? You need that when to make your billing decisions?
So February is an appropriate time to bring up this discussion. It coincides with when we start reaching out to our irrigation water customers. Billing is gonna happen usually the end of February, beginning of March. So it's very appropriate timing. The reason we had what we had this time, given the surcharge that we sent out, we went into drought midway through the summer irrigation season, and so we couldn't change the billing. Most people had already paid.
All right.
We had to wait for the season to finish, then send out the supplemental bill. That caught a lot of people off guard. Probably could have done a little bit better job of communicating out that was coming, but regardless, that's why it happened the way it did. If we're able to solidify our position prior to the April 1st payment deadline, hopefully we can catch that.
That's a tough position to be in.
It is.
It's kind of like releasing water out of Folsom. There's always a.
Yeah.
It's
So,
damned if you do it, damned if you don't.
I had a question for Dustin. What's the current rate what's the current market price for water transfers?
So I can report on, pricing from the last transfer season, 2021, and they ranged from, I'm talking north of Delta to south of Delta. It was about $525 an acre foot on the low end, up to $700 an acre foot. And, you know, again, depending on hydrology, demand, those types of things, I would expect a similar range. The high end could go a little higher this year if we stay dry, or if we enter a dry cycle. There is an extensive amount of demand, especially in the Central Valley.
Yeah.
There's an extensive amount of municipal demand, because there still is currently a 0% allocation for the state water project. That's LA, you know, that's 25 million people in California that receive water from the state water project. Now, I do expect, given the current snowpack, that will be increased. But 5%, 10% is still insufficient to meet normal municipal and ag demand of the state water project. So, barring a really wet next few months, I would expect water transfers to be part of the suite of actions that the state can considers in drought response.
So, okay, so the Colorado River, all their storage is declining, and they're starting to turn off customers and not serve it after 20-some years. How's that gonna affect LA and their demand for us, our water?
Yeah, well, that's, again, Metropolitan Water District, that's one of their inputs to their system. So they've got State Water Project, they've got local supply, and then they've got Colorado River Supply. So any of those or all of those that are reduced obviously affects their ability to deliver water. I don't track Metropolitan's conservation efforts closely, but my understanding is that they have entered drought stage and they're enforcing supply and demand measures as they have their own drought planning documents, so.
But they still they like water. They like a lot of water. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chip. Thank you, Jennifer. Director's reports. Did you want to add on to what you just said?
I'm done.
Okay, Director Heck.
Yeah, this will be very brief. Basically, I was without power, lots without water, no internet, no phone for nearly 9 days. So I didn't get a lot of opportunity to do very much. I did have a good meeting with the Contractors Association this last week, and I'm trying now that we are dug out and have power, be able to move out into the community and do a little bit more.
Thank you.
That's it, my report.
Yeah, I received a lot of feedback on the drought surcharge, the timing of it, and why we waited until Christmas week to send out the bill. People were really excited themselves. And so I hopefully be able to get it closer to October 15th next year if that was the case. But people were not happy. I'm surprised none of them, they were gonna show up, you know.
I don't think that they were sent, Chip, can you clarify when they were sent out?
They were sent out in November.
Yes, they were. They're due the 10th of January.
It's probably the due date.
No, well, not what all my customers were saying, but
They were
anyway.
all sent out at the same time,
Hopefully
correct?
we'll not have that again, that was the thing. And then on January 10th, I attended the West Placer Watersheds Resource Advisory Group meeting, and they emphasized the amount of funding available for state and federal grants. And so everyone is really confident that there's gonna be grants available. Hopefully we'll be in a position to some of those projects. And then, I'd like to get a couple of, I'd like to revisit the workshop, the standing committees. We kind of shelved that for a while, and I don't know what the will of the board is, but, we had wanted to have workshops where we could hear things in advance, where we didn't act on them, and then wait until the next meeting from a lot of different items. And it seems like they've come in to be just to report out on statistics of what the departments are doing. And I don't know if that was the intent, and I wanted to kind of poll my fellow board members to see, maybe we had instead of just 1 hour where we just hear information, we have at 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock, a longer period of time where we could talk about things that typically, Director Heck went to a lot of work to put the standing committee policy together, 5300. And there was a lot of discussions, if you look back on committee agendas, that there was to keep the board informed. I think the purpose of the committee is to keep the board informed on actions of the board and at the district and the different departments. So we kind of said, let's try it out and see how it goes, but it's been several months, and I was wondering if any of my fellow board are interested in standing committee.
Are you asking for input now, or at some other point?
Let's both think about it. I mean, I would like to bring it to another item, to have it as an item on this, for agenda, for an agenda item, to see what. It seems like there was a lot more discussions in the monthly committee meetings than we're getting in our 1 hour report. So that's like.
Director Peters. Director Hall?
I too got a lot of feedback on the drought surcharge. And what struck me is that probably we missed an opportunity for helping people to understand the foundation for the drought surcharge. I think most people they didn't put two and two together, and so they were surprised. And I think we could do better with take more advantage of that opportunity. But the other thing is just really the lack of understanding about why we would even need this, and kind of the way people put different facts that they perceive with this. The reality is that it's a complete flyover. There's no connection between what their perspective is, and that perspective is still valid with what the reality is. And so I think not just when we're sending out a notice to people, but we really have to beef that up. And just people don't understand how it works. And the communication that you sent about kind of how we developed the amount of the surcharge, that was helpful documentation for us as board members, because then we could provide written responses to people that were based on fact, and so that was quite helpful. And I would encourage that going forward too, where we're getting individual emails, we can be providing information back that's consistent across the district. So that was just, I think that we have a lot of work we can do on that, and I think as our climate conditions become the new norm, that's going to be really, really critical. That people don't feel like, well, no, it's like, when do we get the bill? Ought to be or if we build it into the rates, whatever it is, people need to be better informed of the cause and effect.
It's more palatable if it's built into the rate. It's hard to get an extra bill that you're not necessarily on your radar.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I don't think you got a lot of pushback on the treated water, right? So you built it in and...
And it's hard for folks, there's a lot of folks who $30 is a grocery trip, right? So I can certainly see the concern and do understand we could have done it better, so we'll work on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hall. So that was my comment also, and thinking a lot about going forward. I think we can get creative about thinking about either pricing or not doing away with the drought surcharge as a individual item each year and needed, and leveling that out would just be. Especially, my comment was those people that, I don't know what the messaging was, but those people that paid their full amount April 1st and weren't paying any more attention all year long.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe they heard to cut back, got caught off guard. And so, I don't know how many of those were out there, but I get very few calls, and that's the ones I got. So, that in mind, I'm looking forward to this discussion in February to get creative in the coming years especially with the fluctuations we've been talking about today. So, otherwise, I think we're doing a pretty good job, and we get a few phone calls. Always do. All right, Greg Jones, you've been patiently watching all day. We didn't acknowledge your presence here today. Do you have any comment today? None? Okay.
No, I'm no comment.
All right. Look forward to seeing you back here. All right.
Nice.
That is it. We are ready to adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Chip.